In today's video, we're discussing a potential blockbuster deal between the Toronto Maple Leafs and the Columbus Blue Jackets. We've come across an article with a pretty crazy trade proposal here between the two clubs. We're going to discuss how it could make sense and how it doesn't, and if these two teams actually make good trade partners or not. Tonight's actually the night as well where Roberto Luongo is being honored in Vancouver. We have news from the NHL waiver wire, lots of injury updates. Team Canada has announced its roster for the World Junior Championships. We also have some trade talk around the Washington Capitals and more. All that coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a lot to cover in today's video. We'll get to the crazy trade proposal between the Leafs and the Jackets here in a few moments' time. First up, we got news from the NHL waiver wire. We had Boston Bruins defenseman Jacob Zboril on waivers yesterday, and he in fact did clear. I thought there might be a chance he may get picked up, that there might be a team out there that might want to keep him on their roster for like a number 6, number 7 role, and he might get more of a chance than he's been getting in Boston, but that's not to be. So Boston will now have the option to assign him to their American Hockey League affiliate. And new on waivers today, the Winnipeg Jets have placed forward Dominic Toninato on waivers. So we'll find out tomorrow at 2 o'clock Eastern time if he's been picked up or if he can be reassigned. Of course, as I said, tonight's going to be a special night in Vancouver as they do battle with the Florida Panthers. They're honoring longtime goaltending legend Roberto Luongo in Vancouver tonight, entering him into the Ring of Honor. Of course, it makes sense to do so when the Panthers are in town, considering those are the two teams he's spent the bulk of his career playing for. Of course, originally drafted as a New York Islanders prospect, but spent the bulk of his time between those two teams. Obviously, Vancouver was probably the Vancouver years were the time I think where he had the most success, came close to winning the Stanley Cup. Obviously, he was the goaltender for Canada during the Olympics when they won gold, when it was actually held in Vancouver as well. So certainly lots of success, lots to like. Unfortunately, things kind of came to a weird ending for Luongo in Vancouver. Remember him, as famous quote saying his contract sucks when he wanted to be traded. The Tortorella years really had some interesting, weird things take place with that Canucks team while he was there as the head coach. But it's certainly going to be a nice evening to honor the greatest Canuck goaltender, at least in my opinion, in Canucks history. Very special player. I think he should be having his number retired myself. But Ring of Honor it is. I guess they felt like maybe if he had played there longer, they'd go the other direction. But it's certainly going to be a special night in Vancouver. We do have a signing in Tampa. The Lightning have signed one of their prospects from the 2023 NHL draft. And have a second-round pick, Ethan Gauthier, who was selected 37th overall. So he gets his 3-year entry-level contract. Of course, he's from the Quebec Major Junior Hockey League team in Drummondville. Some other news as well. Yesterday, we talked about the fact that the Minnesota Wild had parted ways with assistant general manager Chris O'Hearn, and that they weren't really talking about what happened or what the reasons were. It's just that they mutually parted ways, and that was it. Well, today, through other reports, we've learned that this dismissal came from the fact that there was an outside firm that was hired by the Minnesota Wild to conduct multiple investigations into Minnesota Wild executives. So I don't know what level the investigations were hired from. Like, is this coming from ownership? Is this coming from Bill Guerin? Not quite clear on that. But obviously they were, several of the members of their executive team was investigated. He was subsequently let go. I'm not sure what they were investigated for, but I don't know if we'll learn more on this situation or not. But the fact that multiple members of the executive team were being investigated certainly sounds concerning for sure. So I don't know. It's something that we're going to have to follow, see if we learn any more. I don't know if anybody else will be part of this. I mean, the bad part here is that I'm not sure. We don't really know what he did, obviously, but he was an important member of their team, and they already have a pretty small staff as it is. So they're certainly going to be crunched that way when it comes to having their work completed, and certainly their main contract negotiator. So that's a big issue. So we'll see who they eventually bring into the fold to replace him. But it's really interesting to find out that there was investigations going on that we had not heard of as well. Sabres forward Jeff Skinner finds himself on IR today after taking a big hit from Nathan MacKinnon last night against the Colorado Avalanche. The Sabres went into Denver and did not start off well at all. The Avalanche absolutely steamrolled them in the first period, scoring 3 quick goals, taking a 3-0 lead. The Sabres did get a late one in the first to end it 3-1. I believe it was their first shot on net. I know when there was about a minute or maybe 2 minutes or something like that left in the first period, the Sabres still had no shots on goal. They finally did get one, and it did cross the line and go in. Obviously, there wasn't much more going for them for the rest of the night, and the Avalanche went on to win, but it hurts even more to lose an important player like Skinner, who's out on IR. Other absences for tonight's games as well include Victor Hedman missing again for Tampa, Jared Spurgeon's out once again for Minnesota, and Chris Tanev will not be with the Calgary Flames. He's been sent home for further evaluation, so he will miss some subsequent time there as well. Of course, we know the big news yesterday was St. Louis Blues head coach Craig Berube being dismissed and let go and fired from his job. And today, further talk about it. Of course, the players talking about it for the first time. And Jordan Kyrou was interviewed and asked, and he said a lot without really saying much of anything at all. When he was asked about the coaching change, his response was, "No comment. He's not my coach anymore," which is quite stunning. Obviously, like I said, you're saying nothing, but you're saying lots by saying nothing. Clearly, I think there was a divide between player and coach. I know Berube was certainly hard on Kyrou. That's fair to say. He wasn't playing up to expectations, though, so I think there's a lot of justification in how that relationship was going. But clearly, Kyrou was ready for a change and certainly not a fan of how things were going between he and the coach there as of late. So that was interesting. You don't usually hear too many comments that kind of raise an eyebrow like that when it comes to things of this nature. But in this case, like I said, he said a lot without really saying anything at all. Dylan Larkin's been back on the ice for the Red Wings, which is good news after the scary incident that happened against the Senators not long ago. Not quite sure yet, still on a timeline to return, but the fact that he's even skating is certainly positive news, and I suspect probably sometime next week will be hopefully when he comes back, but we'll have to wait and see how everything's going. And the Washington Capitals today also had to place Sonny Milano on injured reserve, so they've recalled Joe Snively to take his place on the roster. We also got big news from Team Canada today for the World Junior Championships coming up. Of course, we're not that far away. The tournament starts on Boxing Day. The team will be heading to Sweden in the not-too-distant future to get acclimated ready since the tournament's over there this year. Of course, it'll be back in Canada next year, hosted in the city of Ottawa. But Team Canada's roster is going to look quite a bit different. They're certainly lacking that star power this year that they've had a lot in recent years. They are going to have projected first overall pick Macklin Celebrini will kind of headline the roster. But amongst, players that have already been drafted, normally you get a little bit more, higher end, name power, you could say. They're not going to have that this year. Like looking at just last year, for example, the fact that they've been able to have Bedard and Shane Wright and Brennan Hoffman and some of these guys for, in some cases, multiple years. Mason McTavish was another one. He didn't play last year, but the two prior. They have a lot of good players. I guess time will tell. A little skeptical if Team Canada may have difficulty defending their championship this year. Might have a real tough time, especially against the Americans and the Swedes. But they are headlined by a couple of Maple Leaf prospects in Fraser Minton and Easton Cowan. Of course, Celebrini, as I mentioned, a couple of Blue Jackets, blue chip prospects, including Denton Matejchuk on defense and Jordan Dumais of the Mooseheads up front. A couple of guys as well, former teammates in junior, Matt Savoy and Connor Geekie. To name a few others, and of course Owen Beck, the only returning player of Montreal Canadiens prospect, and Beck was not even an original member of the team last year. He was a late injury replacement, so goes to show you how much this roster's turned over. There's lots of players that could make this team better that are eligible to play, but are in the NHL and are not going to be released, including Shane Wright, of course, who's not in the NHL but AHL. But most agree that there's really no benefit from his development to go to that tournament again. And then there's, of course, Connor Bedard and Adam Fantilli are both eligible to play, and they're both in the NHL. You've also got Zach Benson with the Buffalo Sabres and Matt Poitras of the Boston Bruins. I would say there's a possibility and I don't know how big of it is, but maybe if anybody has a chance to be released and let go, it's Poitras. I know he started the year off good in Boston. I think he's still okay, but I've noticed there's been times where his ice time has been cut back by head coach Jim Montgomery. He's kind of sat on the bench for stretches at times as well. And I wonder if they might be, before it gets too deep in the season, would consider giving him a break and sending him to the World Juniors. I don't know for sure. I don't think there's any chance the others go. Fantilli, Bedard, and Wright are for sure not going. I think when it comes to Benson, I've heard enough comments from the Sabres to confirm that he's not going. But Matt Poitras, I would say, is a possibility. So we'll see. They do have room on their roster for one more forward. They left one spot open with the hopes that one of the NHL guys would be released to go. One of the most surprising cut in the forward group was Jagger Furcus. I would suspect that Furcus will be the guy to go if they don't get Benson or Matt Poitras from the Bruins to be released to go to the tournament. So we'll see. Of course, the tournament starts on Boxing Day. I will be doing lots of videos and covering the tournament closely like we do every year around the Christmas holidays. So certainly stay tuned for that. And we'll be getting more information on other countries and their teams and rosters here soon as well. Zach Parise might be making his return to the NHL soon, according to Elliotte Friedman. Parise has been skating and training pretty hard in the state of Minnesota where he lives, and there's rumors and speculation that he's obviously training as hard as he is because he wants to play again, and that most expect him to go back to Lou Lamoriello and the New York Islanders. I don't know what the contract would look like. I'm assuming league minimum for the rest of the year. Hard to say for certain, but that's the speculation. That he is training hard, wants to play, and that's most likely where he's going to end up. So we'll see. In Washington, we've heard lots about the Ethan Bear contract. That is going to take a little bit before it's official. The rumored contract is 2 years at $2 million per year. Apparently what happened was Ethan Bear had an insurance policy that's paying him right now that he had taken out prior to going to the World Championships last year where he was injured. Of course, that injury then later required a big surgery and obviously a long layoff to recover, which is why he's not in the NHL as of right now, or he would have been signed before the season started. So Elliotte Friedman was reporting on this, saying that his insurance policy was based on him making like $3 million. So there's absolutely no benefit for Bear to sign a day sooner than he's ready and able to play. So clearly he'll go to Washington and make this official once he's 100% ready to go. But for right now, he still needs just a little bit more time to be officially, ready to play, so to speak. So it could be hard to say exactly when his contract's made official, but that's the reason why it hasn't been. So there's really no incentive in that sense. But this is going to create a situation where we're going to see another move out of Washington, and it very well could be a trade. They already have 8 defensemen on a roster, and Ethan Bear's not going there on this kind of term contract to be an extra. He's certainly going to jump into their top 6 and play. He may start off on the third pair just to get his feet wet and build up, some playing time while he gets his legs under him and everything with the new team. And obviously it's been a long layoff for him. But over time, they kind of expect him to probably be a top 4, be a second pair guy. But for right now, that's going to probably leave guys like Alexiev or Johansson kind of further out looking in again because they're already extras on a lot of nights. So we're either going to see possibility of a demotion through waivers or maybe a trade. I mean, Alexiev's been there quite some time, former first rounder. I'd be curious to see what they do, but we could see another subsequent move on the blue line for the Capitals because of the Ethan Bear trade. So we'll have to follow that. And as I mentioned, could we see a trade between the Jackets and the Leafs that would eventually land possibly Patrick Laine, the former number 2 overall pick behind Austin Matthews, on the same team as Matthews after all this time? The article that we're referencing here is actually from Editor in Leaf. And if you're familiar with this website, and I know I've seen a lot on Twitter, some of the takes by this Toronto-based website is kind of ridiculous at times, to be completely honest. And sometimes I like to talk about things that they write just because it's comical. This trade that they propose is never going to happen. I'll be upfront with that. I thought it would be interesting to talk about, but I do think there's a chance that this trade could be modified to be more reasonable, that it might actually make sense in some capacity. That's what I want to get people's takes on here. So let's see. So I'm going to show you the proposed trade first, and then I'll talk about how I feel it could be more reasonable, because this trade, it's gonna, when you see this, you're gonna laugh, and you're gonna think that there's no way this is ever gonna happen, which I completely agree with. So we're only talking about this for entertainment purposes, and I'm gonna put out my take on this trade on how it might make sense. So for example, this website has the trade going between the Leafs and the Jackets. It has the Maple Leafs acquiring a top-tier defenseman in Zach Werenski. That's the big thing here, is they need that elusive number one defenseman. I wouldn't disagree with that. They really could use a true number one defenseman. Werenski could be a good, candidate for that. So I'm not going to rule that out completely. And of course, Patrick Laine, the other piece going to the Maple Leafs, with the Jackets retaining half of his salary for the remainder of his contract, which is another year on top of the current one. So the going to the Jackets, though, is William Nylander, 2 first-round picks, Max Domi, Calle Jarnkrok, David Kampf, and Easton Cowan. That is insane. For starters, William Nylander has enough value himself to justify a trade for Werenski. If these two teams really wanted to shake things up and do a Nylander for Werenski deal, there might be something there. Maybe. I stress maybe. I'm not sure. But if you think about that being, I'm not sure that it's even 1-for-1, but of all the pieces in this trade, it's the only thing that's remotely close to being even. So then you have Laine at 50%. Would that be valued at 2 firsts, Domi, Jarnkrok, Kampf, and Cowan? No way. That's insane. Absolutely insane. I'm surprised where this is a Leaf-based website, from a Toronto perspective, trying to make this team better, that they want Patrick Laine at 50% retained, and they think that's what it would cost, and that's what they're prepared to give up to make it happen. That, I normally, when you see these Homer type websites, usually you get them making a trade that's way more favorable for their team, not the other team. Columbus would laugh at this trade all day. It might hurt to lose Werenski, but to get Nylander, Cowan, 2 first-rounders, the other players that are good depth pieces, there's no way. The Leafs lose this trade all day long, every time, no matter how you shake it here. This is insane. Now, this is what got me thinking. After seeing this article, really making its rounds through social media in the past, I think probably 48 hours, I got thinking about is there any part of this that makes sense, that could work? And it's obviously, we know that William Nylander, and I think that we know this well enough, wants to stay with the Maple Leafs. His price tag is going to be way more now than it was in the offseason, because he's having a hell of a year. Fair to say. His number has gone up. If they want to keep Willie, it's going to cost them a pretty penny. That is, I think we can all hopefully rationally agree on that. He is going to be commanding over $10 million. I wouldn't be surprised if he wants 11. And he's played like he's worth it this year. So I think he's justified in asking for it, to be completely honest. Now, unless something completely falls off the rest of the year, that's, I think, where I see his number being, somewhere around 10.5 to 11. Would he love to sign a long-term deal for that price tag and stay in Toronto? I think he absolutely would. Can the Leafs do it, though, without completely surrendering more depth on this team? Because here's the problem. They still have another year of John Tavares, right? So they would have it would be really, really challenging cap-wise to have Matthews, Marner, Nylander, and Tavares all making $11+ million. So your depth pieces, which they change drastically from year to year because they're always looking for bargain players, is going to have to get even cheaper. Some of those middle six or top middle pair defensemen that are making that $2-3 million range. When you're looking at your Domies, your Bertuzzis, your Jake McCabe's, like those kind of players, they're going to have to go because you can't afford to keep them anymore. Like, because you need to round out your roster and you're going to need to find even more money. Yes, the cap is going up, but they've already got an increase to Matthews kicking in next year. We don't know what they're doing with their goaltending. They really should try to improve their defense further. They have a lot of question marks. So is it, as much as they want to pay Nylander, or like Nylander wants to stay and get paid, there is an argument to be made that is it in their best interest to maybe rejig the team and consider moving, whether it be Nylander or somebody else that's making a big salary, to try to shake up the makeup of the team. And we won't know the answer to that until the end of the season, because obviously they're trying to win a Stanley Cup. So they don't want to trade anybody crucial to that right now. So they're not going to do this deal in season. There's no doubt. If it had any chance of happening, it would be in the off season. If the Leafs win a Stanley Cup, well, they're going to feel differently about things than if they don't. If they have a little bit of playoff success, but no more than last year, well, they're going to feel differently again compared to, let's say, they make a run to the conference final and lose. Like, depending on how things go, it's going to drastically change or update their plans. And that's definitely reasonable to say that. So with all that said, the only way it makes sense to trade Nylander is if they absolutely can't come to terms on a contract and they just decide, listen, we just can't do it. Let's say that his number is just too high, they're not coming to terms, and they decide to try to trade him and let the new team acquiring him get an extension in place before he hits unrestricted free agency. Maybe they try to do a trade with Columbus for Nylander and for straight up for Werenski or something to that effect, where those two are the centerpieces. At least they would get an elite top pair defenseman. Like, maybe that happens. Could you involve Laine at 50%? I guess perhaps. Maybe it's Nylander and something else. I don't see the Leafs wanting to part with Easton Cowan. He's a good-looking prospect, and they don't have a lot of those right now. Could it be Nylander, maybe a pick, maybe it's Yarncroke, Domi, Camp. I don't know. Maybe some other piece there. I'm not sure what the second piece would be, but Nylander and something else for Werenski and Laine at 50%. Maybe, but I don't think the Leafs get better, though. It's kind of a trade. I mean, I guess in a sense, maybe they do. It's hard to say because we don't know how things would work out with the new roster construction. And Zach Werenski obviously is a top interesting player to watch, right? So you got Werenski. Can Laine find his game playing with Matthews? Like, those two I've never really crossed my mind of putting those two together before. So it's interesting. So for one, this trade's likely never going to happen, not to the way it's described at the very least. Could these two teams be trade partners, though? I think if, and I stress if, this is only if, Nylander cannot remain in Toronto, if they cannot come to terms and it gets to the point that they're going to move him, I can see Columbus being a team that would make an attempt to trade for him. Absolutely. I can see them where they're kind of going through a change and a retool here. They might even have new management by then to try to bring in a big player like him as a big splash to try to get this team going. I mean, he'd be awesome on a line with Adam Fantilli. So, maybe those two guys are what gets Johnny Gaudreau. Maybe get Gaudreau, Nylander, Fantilli. That's a fun sounding line, right? So, there's options there. I can see Columbus maybe getting in the mix if it came to that. Would they want to trade Werenski, though? Not ideally, but, when you're having a bad season like they are and there's no end in sight of when you're going to get better, I guess you got to get creative and be willing to do things that maybe you didn't think you wanted to do. But it could be a good acquisition for the Leafs, maybe. But, again, crazy trade. I wanted to get everybody's opinion on it. Is there any chance these two teams connect in any capacity? If they can't sign Nylander, is this a good landing spot for him? Could they maybe get Werenski out of the deal? Let me know your thoughts. Or is this a trade in this article just completely bogus and is never going to happen in any capacity whatsoever? Let me know your thoughts and we'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with the latest news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.